I learned early on in your life, you may not know what you want to do, but learning what you don't want to do is also motivating.
For sure.
And so I learned I could not be told when to go have a cup of coffee, how many days I could take to bereavement days. I had 2 personal days. I took one. They asked me what it was for. I said, doesn't that defy the definition of personal? If I got to tell you what, if you really need to know, I have a boil on my ass that needs to be lanced. But it's personal. That's why I need the day off. So I'm like in this bastion up here. I'm a Jewish Republican, which is like being a Sasquatch. Like where I live, it'd be like seeing a Sasquatch flying on the back of a unicorn. And I do like test surveys wherever I am. Like I ask questions. So I belong to a country club. Believe it or not, a lot of affluent Jewish people are liberals, right? So
Yeah.
I'm in this country club. One of maybe 3 Republicans out of 240 members. And I just say, how you feeling about Joe Biden now? Like, honestly, I'm not trying to be a dick. Like, tell me what you're thinking. And let go of all your hatred of all the things that you hate and speak honestly to what you see is happening to this great country that you all guys have benefited from. And it's amazing. Like they stutter, they stick to this conflicted propaganda that they've been inundated with, and so but they're intelligent enough to know that they are full of shit.
Yep.
But it's like watching your computer slowly break down, you know?
Yeah.
And it's I have fun. But what I was going to say is I'm seeing a trend of people, I hate to use the word waking up, but that's the way I'm describing it. In my little microcosm of the liberal world, I'm seeing a trend of people going, all right, you've pushed this too freaking far.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that's indicative of the country right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's good because we're kind of insulated the opposite way where, being in Utah, especially southern Utah, I think northern Utah, there's a lot more liberal-minded people. They actually think they're Republicans.
Yeah.
They're not, but in our area, I think more people are so conservative that it's hard to really know what is happening outside of our community. I mean, we have an idea based on, we've talked about some of this stuff before, even on the podcast, of seeing, certain, influencers or stuff we see on social media or the message changing, like, hey, maybe $5 a gallon gas and maybe, high taxes, the market's getting crushed right now. People being outpriced to homes, what's inflation. You see all these issues are happening as a result of certain ideological principles that are running our government that have impacted everybody. Maybe they're not the wisest choices, right? What blows me away, though, is in the world today, I feel like that whether somebody is conservative or liberal, you take Republican to Democrats, there was, I think if you go back 20 or even 20 years ago, there was a lot of things that Republicans and Democrats agreed on, and a lot of them were these family values, leading a good life, a lot of which were based on religious principles. We could agree on what it was like to raise a child or raise a family, that it was a good thing. Capitalism and the free enterprise system was good. It created a lot of wealth, and it just seems like today that, they've gone so far apart. It's almost like being a Democrat isn't really having liberal American principles. It's just being totally, communist, really. It is. They're communist ideologies, right? It's crazy to me.
Well, so I grew up, it's weird. Like people ask me all the time, why are Jewish people Democrats, And so my dad died when he was 58, but he was a great guy. And he was a Democrat, but the Democrat, I say to my brother all the time, if Dad came back to life, right now. That's not his party. His party was he was a fiscal conservative with with the desire to have a safety net for the most downtrodden of our society, with Christian belief system, with family values, with the belief that anybody could come here with a hard work ethic and a desire and make something of themselves. And the Democrat Party of my dad is not what doesn't exist anymore, based on what I see. It's an ideology that it's, in my opinion, is goal is to destroy everything that made this country the country that we are. They're inch by inch and piece by piece dismantling it, right? And it's becoming unrecognizable as far as, and I'll tell you what, you guys, I've never been an extremist in anything, even in like the world that we came from, America world, where I grew up with guys that were fanatics and extremists and very, very one-dimensional. Like it was live, breathe, eat, die, sleep, Primerica. I was never that guy. I was like, this is the vehicle by which I enhance the rest of my life and the other interests in my life. It's the first time in my life that I remember or felt like if I don't act up, really bad crap's going to happen. Like I have never been so passionate about pushback. And you guys live in an insulated world. I see the reality of intelligent people who are influencers, who are so brainwashed that the stuff that comes out of their mouth is automatic, and it's almost impossible to believe that they believe what they're saying.
Yeah,
it's frightening. It's like a zombie. It's a zombie universe up here, right? It's just crazy. It's funny. My kids, like, they go, Dad, like, you're turning into Doomsday Daddy. Like, are you going to start prepping now? I'm like, I'm buying whatever I got to do, man.
Well, yeah, I think it just comes with your level of awareness, right? As we have more maturity in life or more time and experience to look back on things, it makes us more aware of being able to predict, hey, these certain actions are going to cause these certain outcomes. And I think you're right, man. I mean, what's happening in the world today, and I think that's one of the reasons why we love this podcast, is it's really something that it doesn't matter if somebody is a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't really matter. What matters is these values, right? Do you believe in values of building a business so you can live a great life and providing for your family financially? Do you believe in the values of faith, of living a good, as you would call it, Judeo-Christian values? Do you believe in having a great family and being a strong man and raising a great family, providing an environment where your kids can grow up and your wife can live a great life? And these things, I think the more we try to shine a light on those things, the more we realize that people are really looking for somewhere they can go to have that example, which, obviously you're the perfect example of that, talking about even being in financial services and being a Primerica, and, there are those extreme values. I think at one point I was that guy. It's all I wanted to do. Morning, noon, and night was work, build my business. It's all I wanted to think about, talk about. I didn't want to do anything else. And then, realizing as I got older, like, hey, I started having kids and a family, and my marriage is very important to me, and my fitness, and being able to live a long, healthy life so I can spend time with my children. And realizing, I think that if we can shine a light on these common principles, that I really think that that's the way we get back to or restore the great values that make America special, and then make people's lives better. And if people enhance their lives, I think that's why people are seeing now today, they're like, oh, these things that are happening in our government, they're not good for my life. What's the word I'm looking for? They definitely don't improve. They're doing the opposite. They're making life harder. They're not making life better, right? They're not raising the quality of life for anybody.
No, it's destructive. Hey, look, I think we're all trying to figure out how do we get peace of mind, what people are constantly looking for outward things to make them happy. They forget that happiness comes from within. I'm a student of I try to be a student of people and what goes on and kind of be a thermostat for feelings around me. I've got 26-year-old son and a 25-year-old daughter. My daughter's a third grade teacher. My son works for Equitable. He's doing really well. He's a wholesaler. It's pretty funny how he wound up there, but thank God they've got conservative values. I never because I never backed off of what was important. We had family ethics conversations about what I don't give a crap what social media says is cool. This is what's cool in the Pressler house.
Yeah.
I told my daughter it's better to stand out for the right reasons than to blend in for the wrong reasons. Treat your body preciously, be rare. I told my son that it takes a much stronger human being as a male to be a kind one than it is to be a mean one, right? People think kindness is weakness. Au contraire. It takes a very strong man to be kind. And I watch anxiety levels. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, I never had a friend of mine say, I'm really anxious today. Like I never had a guy say, hey man, I've never said to a guy, hey, you want to go play like some pickup football? And none of my friends ever said, I'm a little depressed today. Right. But now it's the common vernacular amongst 20-year-olds is, I'm very anxious, or I have anxiety. And it's this disconnect from all the things that made us great, right? Like sense of community, the comfort of a good family, the sturdy hand of a father or a friend's father. Even if you didn't, like in my group, even if your dad wasn't around, someone else's dad would give you a smack in the ass if he thought you were stepping out of line in a way that was going to cause you harm down the road.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing worse than somebody blowing smoke up your ass when you're doing the wrong thing. My kids grew up with behavior has consequences. Good behavior has good consequences. Bad behavior has consequences. And if you don't experience the consequence right after the behavior, then you learn to up your bad behavior to the next level. And I'm watching our society fail to have consequences for bad behavior. And if you get away with one little thing, then you go, oh, you look around and you go, oh, nobody stopped me from doing that. Maybe I'll up my game a little bit. And that's what I think all this depression comes from this disconnect from church, disconnect from religion, disconnect from community, disconnect from interpersonal relationships. This narrative that the world is coming to an end. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, a green lunatic, and I was like, hey, whatever happened to that aerosol can thing that we weren't supposed to be using? We weren't supposed to be using aerosol cans anymore. Completely forgot about that. I don't even know if you guys were old enough to remember when aerosol cans were putting a hole in the ozone layer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We've got to get rid of the aerosol cans, but then the big pharma and all these big companies realize, well, aerosol cans people are using them more than pump. So we still have aerosol cans. We've just moved on to cow farts are more dangerous than aerosol cans, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
It's funny.
Yeah. Mike, our audience, by the way, all this stuff is just really, really good. I think what hopefully people will gather from this is just, obviously the name of our podcast is Solid, and you're a solid man. And I kind of want to delve into what created you. Where did you come from, and maybe back up and talk about, you've already alluded to some of it, it sounds like you had a great father, but where all this came from, because Jeff and I and yourself, we all, built businesses in the financial services industry with Primerica. And from afar, one of the things you said earlier was Primerica's never been your life. You said it in different words, but Primerica's never been your life, but it's been a vehicle for you to create a great life. And watching you from afar, that's absolutely true. I never remember seeing you being the Primerica is your life type guy. And I always admired that about you. I could tell, I could sense a peace about you. It seemed like you were always happy. I'm sure that was a choice to choose to be happy. Fun to be around. It seemed like you were always having a good time, a genuine good time. And so I just, if you don't mind, maybe talk about your story. Obviously you got involved. A lot of the people listening to this are going to be those that are in Primerica, but that we have a big audience outside of that as well. And maybe talk about, what you did before that. It doesn't have to be about your Primerica story, but just what's your background? Where did you come from?
I appreciate the question. And there's a lot to my upbringing that I attribute to my dad, and I was fortunate. And I don't want people to think that if you didn't have a solid dad, you can't be a solid person yourself. I just happened to be fortunate enough to have a role model around me that I could kind of emulate. But, the Primerica side of this is controversial because I used to say to whoever would listen to me, my life is what happens in between the meetings, not at the meetings, right? And I think that was controversial because I won awards. I think we all want to be recognized. I think we all want to be praised, and it does feel good. But that's not what motivates me. What motivates me is what my family thinks of me and my friends think of me. And I lost my mom this summer. And I was with both my parents when they took their last breath, which is really a powerful thing to be able to say. And it came from a lifelong pursuit of freedom, right? So I came from a father who came from nothing, went into the military, got married at 22 years old, went into the military, was an Air Force guy, came out of the military, went to work for corporate America, and got stuck in that trap of corporate America because he had 3 kids quick and had to take the salary, but he was always entrepreneurial spirited. And I knew that he was a caged animal, right? Like my dad was a freaking caged animal. He always made somebody else look good, but in the corporate world, he was the threat, right? So when he would run up to that place where the only place to go was to get the guy's job, they'd abuse him and he'd go somewhere else. So I watched a rebel being chained to a desk, so maybe I was formulated in that regard, thinking I don't want to be trapped in a world where I feel like a caged animal, right? The other thing is my dad was a funny dude, and everything about his life was given to other people and making sure. I watched my father. When people walked away from my dad, they felt better about themselves than they did when they walked up to him, right? So my dad went out of his way to make other people feel good in his presence. So I picked up that. Like that looked fun and that looked good. And the other thing was my dad was a badass, right? But never had to talk about being a badass. You just knew it. And his kindness far exceeded the fact that you knew that he could beat the snots out of you if need be, and was not afraid to do so if there was a threat to his family, right? A gentleman with kindness and dignity, respect for women, which I don't think is a terrible thing. Like now, if you're masculine, you're toxic. My dad was a kind, masculine man who cared about taking care of the people around him that he loved, and that sphere expanded to other people and who he cared for, right? And I watched that, man. And so that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a version of that. And I wanted to be a strong dude that I knew I could take care of myself. I knew I could take care of the people, but that wasn't my lead. My lead wasn't Bravio's bullshit, trying to act like something, because I think if you walk with the grace of God and you feel good about who you are, you don't have to prove that to anybody else, right? I think insecure people have to show off to make people to cover for their own insecurities and act in a way that they want people to perceive them as being people who know who they are. You ever run into guys who go, "You know who I am"? I've run into a lot of those guys in my life. My answer to that is, are you having memory issues? Like, do you need me to actually tell you who you are? Shouldn't you know that yourself? Right.
That's big. That's big.
So I was always content in knowing that I didn't care about what other people thought about me as long as I felt good about me and what I was doing was good, not bad. Right.
Yep.
I don't think it's good to feel good about yourself if you're a scoundrel, but if you feel like you're giving it all and leaving it all on the court or on the field of, then you're always going to get criticized. So my Primerica career was, my dad, said, you got to get a good job, got to get your foot in the door, you got to work your way up the ladder of success, because that's what he knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a job on Wall Street. I was a solid C student. I sent a bunch of resumes out back in the day. I found out early on that when the letter responding to your resume says, "We regret to inform you," it usually isn't followed by a very large salary offer, right? So I went down to Wall Street one day, and I started knocking on doors in these gigantic buildings. And I walked into a brokerage house, and I asked what the name of the manager was. At like 7:30 in the morning, there was a receptionist there. They gave me the name, and I said, "Can I talk to them?" They said, "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "No." They said, "Well, the markets are going to open soon. If you don't have an appointment," I said, "Would you mind if I waited until the end of the day?" And so it'd be like Jeff Fields, that was the manager, found out there was some 22-year-old kid sitting in the lobby from 7:30 until 5. And the guy brought me into the office and said, "Hey, you're either mentally damaged or you're willing to do whatever it takes to win. I'm willing to take a chance." And that's how I got my first job, which was an entry-level position. They made me do cold calls all day long. They paid me $800 a month. I made money for others, and I soon realized that I did not like working for other people. Eventually, I got asked to leave that firm because I threatened to throw I was late to work twice. There was a fire in the PATH train that went into New York City, that went into the World Trade Center. I had to walk back to New Jersey through rat-infested waters and got to my desk late. And he said, "You're late." And I said, "I don't know if you read about the fire in the PATH train." He said, "I don't want to hear your excuse." A week later, there was a snowstorm that caused me to have a 3.5-hour commute. And he said, "That's strike number 2." And I said, "Well, save strike number 3 because I quit." And he said, "Well, you can't quit. You got to put your 2 weeks notice in." And I said, "We're on the 55th floor. Here's my 2 weeks notice, and don't stand by any open windows." And apparently that gets you an armed escort out of the
That's
building.
awesome.
So the crazy
And
thing
you're
is
kind of a big guy, so he probably took it serious.
by the way, I look like a girl right now compared to what I looked like back then. I had to get a stretchy suit. I had to get an elastic suit to fit me. I had like a 54-inch expandable spandex suit was the first suit I bought.
That's funny.
When I came home, and my dad says, "What are you doing home?" And I said, I got let go, and I left. And he goes, you never leave a job until you have a job. And so he had a tremendous work ethic. I took another position as selling the office automation equipment. At that time, my buddies started Primerica. They had zero credibility with me. Jim Meyer, Carrie Ginsberg, you guys know those names. But they stayed with it. And after about a year, I learned early on in your life, you may not know what you want to do, but learning what you don't want to do is also motivating.
For sure.
And so I learned I could not be told when to go have a cup of coffee, how many days I could take to bereavement days. I had 2 personal days. I took one. They asked me what it was for. I said, "Doesn't that defy the definition of personal?" If I'm going to tell you what, if you really need to know, I have a boil on my ass that needs to be lanced, but it's personal. That's why I need the day off. So after being kind of like disenfranchised and disappointed and not wanting to look like the guy 20 years ahead of me in my job, I gave a shot at being an entrepreneur, which the only really way for me to do so was through the doors of Primerica, because I had no capital to do it any other way. And so that was my way of leveraging sweat equity in order to get into a business. And by the way, the one guy that my dad always told me, never have a human being as a hero, because human beings are flawed and they will ultimately disappoint you, right? So he taught me to if there are characteristics of someone that you like, then emulate the characteristics of the person that you want as a hero, but don't make a hero out of that person, because they have flaws that you don't see. And if you spend enough time with them, you will see their flaws.
Man, that's good.
Great piece of advice. Yeah.
So even in Primerica, I would look at different people and I'd say, well, I like the way he works. I'm going to try to emulate his work ethic. I like the way he raised his kids. I'm going to try to steal a piece of that. I like the way he talks about his wife or how they interact. I'm going to take a piece of that, but I'm not going to make a hero out of those guys. And there's a lot of people worthy of hero status in Primerica based on what's out there in the real world. But even those guys are human beings, right? Mm-hmm. So my father told me, but here's the crazy thing. He was the closest thing I had to a hero. And he told me in no uncertain terms, should I join the business? And so my first time I ever had to defy my father was to do Primerica. And I did it. And my dad watched to see what I was going to do. And after about 2 or 3 years, when he realized I was digging in, he kind of broke down and said, I respect what you're doing. And he showed me his life insurance policies 3 years after I joined Primerica.
Wow.
Wouldn't let me look at a thing until I was 2 years RVP when he finally showed me his 10 whole life policies. Right. And so, so I had to do the business with that as a backdrop. My hero was not thrilled with my career choice.
What do you think it was? What was the reason he, obviously he had this entrepreneurial spirit. Here you were trying to do your own thing. What do you think it was him not wanting you to pursue this?
I think there was a couple of things. One is he was too close. He watched Carrie and Jimmy grow up, and so he saw too many of their flaws early on. You know what I mean? Like, we were knuckleheads hanging out in his house. In Carrie Ginsberg, his claim to fame was he was going to be the first Jewish breakdancer in the world. He studied, and he kicked my dad's TV set over, spinning on his head in our den while he was watching a Giant game. And so there was a credibility issue from the people introducing me to the company. And there was also a brainwashing of military brainwashing coupled with corporate America brainwashing that didn't let his brain accept this company that was being inundated with negative publicity as a way for our competition to compete with us, because they couldn't compete with us in a product or concept manner. The only thing they could do was ridicule us. So he bought into the ridicule, right? So he thought some of the negative propaganda was accurate. I mean, I could make a comparison to how the media gets behind the Democrat Party to brainwash people to think that their policies are correct, even though we all know that it's just a bunch of propaganda, right? Yeah. So my dad brought into the negative propaganda of Main Street America, saying that this was a turnip truck that was going to go out of business. And then I'll tell you, the turning point for my father, by the way, was Sandy Weil. My father sold his first Xerox machine he ever sold was to Sandy Weil in Newark, New Jersey.
No way.
Wow.
And followed Sandy Weil's career to the point where he took over us.
Wow.
At that moment, it was this legitimization. Oh, two things took place. He respected the heck out of Jimmy, Carrie, and my commitment in the face of extraordinary criticism, because most people who take the heat that we took folded.
Yeah.
And we kept coming, right? So my dad respected the intestinal fortitude it takes to fight the good fight, even when the world is telling you you're going to fail. So I think that won him over. And then the legitimization of the company itself by Sandy Weil going, yeah, I want that, right?
Yep.
And so but he was just afraid, like what I think most people don't realize is the sheep in the wolves in sheep's clothing are our families whose intentions are to protect us, and the road to hell is paved with those good intentions.
Yeah.
And because they are not educated completely to the reality of what we're doing, their assumption is we're going to get hurt, and their role becomes the protector of us, but it actually winds up being the thing that they become our biggest detractors rather than our biggest, fans.
So what kept you going? 'Cause, I mean, a lot of people, no matter what they do in life, if they're going to start a business or they're going to do something that goes against the grain, which anybody going to do anything special in life, it doesn't matter what it is in any part of life, if they're going to do something different, they're going to have to go through controversy. They're going to have to go through, tough times. What kept you going when your hero's telling you, you shouldn't do this, you're crazy, you're hanging out with a couple of knuckleheads like Jimmy and Carrie, and he's not going to support that until he sees some real evidence that he should be supporting that? What kept you going? What was it? What was it that not only kept you going, but doing the right things when it was really probably the hardest time to do?
So I try. It's a great question, and I try to kind of think back in real. People reinvent history, and a lot of guys who become successful will say, "Oh, I knew from the minute I walked in the door I was going to be a success." And I think very few people actually have that much confidence to know where they're going to be. Yeah. But I am a firm believer in gut instincts, right? And I mean, I talk about it when I'm doing a new briefing and stuff. I talk about there's a lot of chatter out there. And you could fall prey to people's negative propaganda, but God gave us this thing called the gut instinct, right? So if what's coming out of my mouth is making some sense to you, and the messenger that's delivering it seems like a decent dude, and the downside to being a part of this is you get a license and an education, then maybe your gut should tell you the direction you should go in, rather than listen to somebody else who isn't your gut, right? So my gut instinct told me there was a market for this, right? The delivery of common sense financial concepts by regular folks was something that was needed, right? Like my recollection of financial guys back then were cocky, condescending, human beings who looked at their client as adversaries, as prey. And here was this company that was taking a different approach. So my gut said the delivery mechanism seemed genius. Go into a community, get a regular dude to go back into the community to talk to regular dudes. So that made sense. I was an economics major in college and political science, and I never was taught personal financial stuff like investing in a mutual fund, getting the right kind of insurance, paying myself first, living on a budget, wants and needs, how money compounds. So I'm like, I was privy to an education in this, and I didn't get an education in this. Imagine all those folks that didn't go to college to learn about finance. What the heck are they being told?
Right.
So I thought there was a market with need. My gut said, yeah, that makes sense. And then I met a few people, and I judged. So there was a lot of people talking crap. My father was buying into it, but I was at the same time, I was meeting people that I was going, this is a special guy. Like I meet Bob Safford, and I'm like, if this company can attract that guy, there's got to be something to it more than what I'm hearing from the detractors, right?
For those that don't know who Bob Safford is, who was he?
Bob Safford was the guy who was so in my chain of command. It was Bob Safford. It was the Schechter family. It was Joe Enser, who was our direct guy that was a senior national. But Bob Safford was one of the. He wasn't the original guy of the A.O. Williams era, but he was soon after recruited, and he was a millionaire by the age of 30, and he decided to take a risk and come over to A.O. Williams and work with Art Williams. And he was our mentor. And about 3 months into my career, I was asked to go see him in Pennsylvania. So it was Carrie Ginsberg, Jim Meyer, Joe Enser, Patty and Dennis Schechter, and then Bob Safford was I was 6 generations from him. And I went to see him, and he was an ex-military guy. He had started his own insurance company and sold it for lots of money before he was 30 years old. He was a Hopkins student. He was a salesman, disciplined, wake up early, go to bed late, a man of faith. And I'm like, holy cow, like, you can't attract a guy like that if you're running a criminal organization, right?
Right.
And then I meet Bob, then I meet Art Williams. And there was something about that guy that just, boom. Like, I don't know if you guys ever had that pleasure, but He was a man. He just walked different. He had an aura. I can't even describe what it was about him that I'm like, all right, I'll follow this guy. Like, I will follow this guy. And, I met Whittle. Like, Bill Whittle, the guy, I don't know. He just walks with some kind of special gift.